Begin with Omkar's question. It's a pity Dr. Santosh Mathew is not here because he was one of the architects of the People's Draft, and I was seated around that table that wrote up that draft. And the NREG is a very complex program. So rather than like a Tinbergen principle of one instrument, one goal, there was this idea that let's have this broad set of goals. We'll use the means by which this is implemented as instruments to achieve those goals. So if you wanted to foster a bottom-up approach and strengthen panchayat institutions, you did it not by making that not by using employment, which was actually the ultimate goal, but by saying that we'll mandate a process by which work will be decided. So it's therefore very complex. And I think you're absolutely right that this debate was as early as in 2006. People were wondering how much burden do you want to place on the NREGA, because if anything doesn't fit anywhere, send it to NREGA. So we have had so many operational guidelines that's made it so much more complex. And I think that's absolutely right, that we don't want to overburden it. And one example is just getting very simple things right has been a huge learning experience for many bureaucrats. So, for instance, they automated all payments, started using banks. And today, as of today, many states are rolling back on the bank payments because they realize there are problems that they didn't anticipate that have come up. And so I think I'd rather have the entire bureaucracy focus on just getting the basic essential principles of the program in place rather than having to think about more and more. And in this context, actually, the way I feel like researchers can engage is to, you brought up the issue of delays in payments. And we have evidence, at least emerging evidence, saying that the NREG has a consumption smoothing role. So in summer, when there's no work, people go to the work sites. But if they don't get paid in the summer, but get paid at harvest time, then you've actually undermined the nutritional sensitivity of the program. And so I also find that indebtedness has grown because in anticipation of the wages, they are borrowing at high interest rates. So just using what we know about the nutrition sensitivity, but taking it back to the bureaucrats as fix the delays in payments would be a good way to deal with that. On the World Bank, the person from Oregon, sorry, I missed your name. So I agree with you that very off-standing of issues. So I would advocate a sort of an ecumenical sort of an approach where you're admitting different sorts of research to come together before you design an RCT. So, and I don't see that happening. People come and do it and get out, and then there's a local team that's trying to salvage the implementation of the RCT. We can talk about it more later. On the collective efforts, Purnima, I think something we should think of something. I haven't thought through it yet. I think communication is a starting point, and leaving aside I think rather than dividing it between methodologies we like and dislike, I think groups are formed around these. We should get away and have it cut differently, and I think a conversation is possible, and the strategy is certainly desirable. So we'll talk about that later.
I didn't have any questions.
Yeah, so I agree with everything Dr. Pasi you said. I think what was not probably clear was that these studies that I was referring to, starting from 2003 onwards. So there was a period when there was a transition. So as I was mentioning, initially there were these ready-to-eat meals, for instance, in Delhi, or food grains which were being given. And then there was a time when there was the Supreme Court order came in, and there was a period during which the transition took place from providing food grains or ready-to-eat items to providing cooked meals. So as of today, of course, all schools have to provide cooked meals. The idea of when I was talking about the paper, starting from 2003 onwards, when we were looking at this transition going from providing either ready-to-eat to single item menus, and then more recently would mean 2006 and so on, when you have multiple item menus coming in, how the uptake of the program changed as a result of that. But as I mentioned, there's still a lot of scope, which is exactly your point, that the program can be improved a lot more, because we still have these instances, as happened in Bihar a couple of years ago. There were these deaths. So we're not even talking about children falling sick. We're talking going to the extent that you might actually have the storage which is in places where it should not be stored, or there are instances in the case of Bihar, at least, where they found there was insecticide in the meal. So in terms of infrastructure, I feel that the program is really lacking, because at least in rural areas, particularly in rural areas, where you do not have the infrastructure to run this program efficiently on a daily basis with minimum disruption to schooling activities. And it is unfortunate that the government has not focused on it, because there's been lip service to the program. As long as something is being given to the kids, fine, we are following the Supreme Court directive. But the moment you start thinking about quality, we are completely lacking there. So how do we make the program better so that more children find the program attractive? So for instance, when we did this study in Delhi, we found that the uptake of the program was 50%. So only 50% of the children, this is looking at MCD schools. These are schools, children coming from slums, the most backward areas in Delhi, the most disadvantaged kids in Delhi, not taking these meals because the quality is so poor. So you might have this program on paper, but what would be the effect of the program in terms of its nutritional impact or long-term health impact if there is no uptake of the program? So you have to ensure that the quality is meeting the minimal standards that it should. And that was the point that I was trying to make. So all the point that you've said is completely valid. And the emphasis, I feel, should be on improving the quality before we can start talking about fortification and so on and so forth, which is the next step. But if we cannot ensure that minimum quality is being met, fortification would be a pipe dream, essentially.
Can we take any more questions?
I just have like one point to make on the question about overburdening the program. So in a way, the framework of approaches is meant to actually clearly bring that out. The first approach was to actually do what the programs are meant to do properly. So which is why I thought that I should put that there first. So overburdening them with these other things. And another point about selection biases, it's almost like the states that did the pulse subsidy, they self-selected into doing it. Because it was Tamil Nadu, Himachal Pradesh and Andhra Pradesh, all flagship PDS states. These are the states that volunteered to do it, and they did it themselves. Nobody mandated it. And they did it to protect people from inflation that was going on in pulses at that time. So it's the way that it happened on its own. And so that really says that the states that have the capacity to subsidize it, they are the ones that actually did do it. Rather than somebody pushing it on them. That's a good point, obviously, that until we bring all states up to that level where there's no leakage, for example, we shouldn't put anything new in there. So, because then we might just waste resources doing that.
Thank you so much. We had wonderful speakers. And to echo their thoughts, before we think of making the social protection programs, as we think of making them nutrition sensitive, let's not forget that there are several implementation challenges that need to be looked at and effectively plugged in. Also, when we talk about layering and convergence of different programs, I think the convergence has to happen at the household level. How do we bring all the programs onto the households in the first 1,000-day window? The same mom and child diet gets all the programs. I think that's the convergence we should keep in mind. And then what happens on the at the higher level is a different issue. Thank you so much.